The Biden administration has unveiled a new federal rule to expand background checks for gun purchases. The policy announced Thursday would require more gun dealers to obtain licenses and start screening their customers. That includes those who sell firearms online or at gun shows. The Justice Department estimates the policy will affect 23,000 unlicensed gun dealers. The move is a direct result of the 2022 Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which expanded the definition of who is required to obtain a federal firearms license. But already, the Republicans who helped write that bill say this rule change is unconstitutional.
I stand by the bill. I mean, the investment in behavioral health is very strong. But when you have partisan hacks in the Biden administration go as far as they did with this bill, now you understand why Second Amendment bills only happen once in a generation.
Stephen Dettelbach, director of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives, joins me now. Mr. Director, you said during an interview with my colleague Margaret Brennan that the test for gun reform policy should be twofold. One, is it legal? And two, will it help save lives? Let's leave the legal question aside for the moment. How is this going to save lives?
It's going to save lives because it's going to ensure that all the people that Congress is requiring to be licensed dealers, that is, people who are engaging in the business of selling guns for profit, are actually following the rules, which includes getting licenses and running background checks. So when firearms dealers, federal licensed firearms dealers, sell guns, they're required by Congress to run background checks. That means that felons and people who are domestic abusers and people who everybody agrees and the law says can't have guns can't buy that gun there. Since that was enacted in the 90s, millions and millions of people have been denied sales who the law says can't have firearms. What's happened is a black market's developed where people who are supposed to be getting licenses are dealing anyways without a license. That means they're not running background checks. That means they're not keeping records. That means they're not helping law enforcement to trace crime guns that are used to kill people and catch the bad guys. What this law says, rule says, is that the law that Congress passed, the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which changed the definition, expanded the definition of those engaged in the business, applies to people who are doing that conduct, no matter where they're doing it. That's all that we're saying here. And we're doing it in a very straightforward, plain way that allows people to understand that you're not allowed to break the law that Congress passed just depending on whether you're doing it out of your trunk or whether you're doing it at a gun show or whether you're doing it on a new social media platform.
Now,
the law is the law.
Speaking of the law, Senators Cornyn and Tillis, Republicans who worked on the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, both say that you now have gone beyond the scope of the law, that this isn't really a Second Amendment thing. This is you're trampling on congressional intent, that the executive branch is doing something it was not given authority to do. How do you respond to that?
Well, I agree that this is certainly not a Second Amendment issue. They're right about that. Tens of thousands of federally licensed firearms dealers are out there every single day following the law and obeying the rules and able to sell guns legally with background checks. We went through the Administrative Procedure Act process in order to push this rule out. That meant that we put out a notice of the proposed rule, that we received 387,000 comments to that rule. Some were sent by many, many members of Congress. The vast majority of comments that we received supported the proposed rule, and we took into account folks who suggested improvements to the rule, and in some cases, focuses to the rule that helped it to make sure that it didn't cover people who went beyond the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, right? This is not a universal background check law. Only Congress can do this. But this is a situation where Congress expanded the definition of people engaged in the business, where there was widespread noncompliance, by the way, even under the old definition, and where we're calling people to obey the law. I'm sorry, go ahead, John.
Well, first of all, I don't want to put words in the mouths of the senators. That was me saying it wasn't a Second Amendment thing. Their argument is that they were clear in drafting the legislation of the law. And I know that it went through the comment process, but the executive branch grants itself authorities that it sometimes doesn't have all the time in American history. So I guess the question is, are you expecting a fight on the grounds that you overstepped the authority that Congress gave you, and what would the defense be?
Well, I don't know what to expect. Obviously, people can, if they want, litigate these things in the court. But if you look at the rule that was promulgated, there's a lengthy preamble. It's really the explanation. It's not the actual rule. The actual rule itself, the regulatory text, is 16 pages, skipping lines. But there's all sorts of footnotes and scores of cases of courts that have evaluated, even under the standard before it was expanded, about people who are engaged in the business of firearms dealing. And the approach that the rule takes is a very practical approach. Mm-hmm. On the one hand, it sets forth very specific conduct, John, as to when a person is likely, or in legally civil administrative cases, presumed to be engaged in the business. And it talks about things that we've seen that people do when they're trying to make money, right? Whether you take credit cards, right, whether you have registered in the state as having a business, whether you're moving inventory in and out of the same kind of things in new form. And it also, by the way, in the final rule, adds in some of the things that are not likely to be engaged in the business, right? That are not going to be presumed. And that's like family transfers. Right. It specifically says that those kind of family transfers are transfers occasionally to federally licensed firearms dealers.
Let me ask you a couple of other quick questions which are important. An ATF report found 40% of gun trafficking investigations involve straw purchases, people who buy guns on behalf of those who can't buy them. Do these new regulations help tamp down on that in any way?
Well, that same report found that more than that, slightly more, 40%, I think 39% were straw purchases, 40% of what we found were people who were dealing without a license, the single largest category of illegal firearms trafficking. But this helps to make sure that that black market, that illicit market in firearms, which is fueled by people dealing without a license, more than anybody else. And those guns are, by the way, we found that 60% of trafficked firearms go straight to people with previous felonies. That makes sense, right, John? I mean, people who can't buy a firearm legally, like the guy in Midland, Odessa, Texas, by the way, who went to a firearms dealer that was a licensed dealer, was told no, and then went on the illicit market and got a gun from somebody dealing without a license and killed 7 people in Midland, Odessa, injured 17 more, including 3 cops. So we believe this is legal, and we believe that it's going to protect people. And it's going to protect people because everybody understands that those type of people shouldn't be having firearms. That's what Congress has said for many years.
ATF Director Stephen Dettelbach, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks, John.